Well, it is now my great pleasure to kind of transition to our conversation that we will have in a moment. But first, I would like to introduce Prince Ermias, His Imperial Highness Prince Ermias Sahle Selassie, who is the President of the Crown Council of Ethiopia and patron of the Royal Ethiopian Trust. He is the only son of His late Imperial Highness Prince Sahle Selassie, and grandson of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Menenin of Ethiopia. Prince Ermias in many ways represents the unity of Ethiopia. He is of Amhara, Oromo, and Guraje background. Prince Ermias was born in Addis Ababa in 1960 and lived in Ethiopia for a considerable part of his early life, where he underwent his primary education. He continued his studies at the Old Ryde Preparatory School and then at Haileybury College in England. He then was in the US to take his BA in Social Studies with an emphasis on economics at the University of California in Santa Barbara and continued his education at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Prince Ermias has a diverse professional background and has been deeply involved in the development and institutionalization of democratic principles and market economic philosophies in Africa, particularly in the Horn of Africa. He's a vocal member of the expatriate Ethiopian community of the United States and has traveled extensively and met with dozens of heads of state promoting the welfare of Ethiopia and Ethiopians. In 1998, he briefed the United States Congress on 2 occasions regarding the prospects for peace in the Horn of Africa. This included a special briefing to the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee on October 14, 1998. So it is my great pleasure to welcome back to the podium Dr. Pankhurst and His Imperial Highness, or up to the stage, I should say, Dr. Pankhurst and His Imperial Highness Prince Ermias, and I will join them in a moment. You'll see the reason for that little moment of setup in a moment. But it is truly my pleasure to kind of start off this conversation, and I would like it to be a conversation amongst the 3 of us. Please, I obviously have questions prepared, but I would like to build upon the incredible presentation by Dr. Pankhurst and continue to tie the Shield of Magdala together with the opportunity to share these histories with this audience that we have today here at the Toledo Museum of Art. We will, at the end, open it up for questions related to today's program. But I would like to take the opportunity to first ask you, Prince Ermias, what does the return of the Shield of Magdala symbolize for you personally? And what do you believe it represents for the broader Ethiopian community today?
I think the most important part, personally for me, has been a form of restoration of justice, especially a looted war trophy belongs to the country of its origin. So to have it back home where it belongs has given me a great sense of pride. But it's been a journey because you learn so much through the process. And honestly, I must recommend also the entire board of the Royal Ethiopian Trust, who never doubted that we'll be able to acquire it. And with God's help, now that we're able to return it back to Ethiopia. So I just want to say it's a win-win victory for everybody.
I completely agree, and I would love if Dr. Pankhurst, you would please also share your participation in this process. And we're here in Toledo, but you will soon take the shield back to Addis Ababa and tell us a little bit about what's going to happen there.
Thank you. I mean, it's a wonderful thing that has happened, and a lot of serendipities and very nice coincidences happened. And when this shield came up for auction in the UK, Newcastle, and a number of people were thinking, well, should there be an attempt to try and stop the auction? The Ethiopian Embassy in London and the Ethiopian Heritage Authority got in touch with the auctioneers and suggested that it shouldn't be sold. And usually, as was this case, the response was, well, it's our right to sell it. It's a free market. And the idea that it shouldn't be sold was not one that the auctioneers were willing to accept initially. And then there were a number of newspaper articles and social media pressure. And at the last minute, the day before the Shield was due to go on auction, the auction was cancelled. And then again, fortuitously, the negotiations with Prince Ermias and the Royal Ethiopian Trusts came to fruition, and this shield has been saved. And it's, for me, the whole restitution is a way of talking about history, bringing it alive, making people think about culture, identity, rethinking the past, building bridges between, in this case, UK descendants of soldiers and people in Ethiopia and the government in Ethiopia, and here, with the museum, with this wonderful exhibition. This shield has been part of that exhibition, and it's one way to get people more interested, more excited. I mean, look at this audience. It's extraordinary to have so many people coming from all kinds of places to listen and hear and learn and enjoy and celebrate this extraordinary opportunity of things coming together in such a fortuitous way.
I completely agree. And so I've been working with Dr. Christine Schock at the Walters now for 3 or so years on Ethiopia at the Crossroads. So I've paid particular attention to the news, and anything Ethiopia related I've been absorbing with great gusto over the past few years. And actually this time last year, Christine and I were in Ethiopia to help condition and pack and receive, in many ways, the generous loans from the Institute of Ethiopian Studies that are on display in the exhibition. So I, of course, noted the auction and all the press, as you say, around the shield earlier this year. And what I am so pleased that we're able to do is spotlight and bring that story in some ways to a closure, right? It's not left up in the open of where did the object go and kind of re-enter in the market and kind of be lost. That we're able to kind of close that circle, write that final chapter. And we had a bit of an addition, bringing it to Toledo on its way back home, but I think the Royal Ethiopian Trust wanted to be able to use this as an opportunity, it's my understanding, to share it with the audiences here in the U.S. So that leads me to also join you in the thanks to the Royal Ethiopian Trust, particularly the board members who are here. And we will have an opportunity to hear from Nicholas at the end for some closing remarks. But Prince Ermias, I would love if you would tell me and tell our audience a bit about why you brought the Royal Ethiopian Trust to existence and about some of its key pillars that it's built upon.
Well, as Alula mentioned, one of our main pillars in the Royal Ethiopian Trust had been to have the foresight to understand the importance of restituting items back to Ethiopia, because they're part and parcel of our identity. And more importantly, for the younger generation of Ethiopians who are growing all over the world, that's a way for them to learn about their history and understand their culture and take interest. And I must say also, I am very surprised by the interest and attendance, and of course, the platform, both the Waters Museum and the Toledo Museum of Art gave us to discuss these issues, because as Adam mentioned earlier, I think there's a new paradigm in how we can look at historical objects, how we can benefit the larger majority than keep thinking about personal possessions. And it would have been a pity to keep such a beautiful shield in somebody's apartment wall when it symbolizes so much more than that. So for me, it's been an educational process. And very importantly, I think it also requires further research, because we believe that this particular shield did belong to the young Tedros. And the reason for that is because of the listed auctioned items to the Lambton estate is itemized. And in one of them, there's a mention that there was a shield belonging to Emperor Tedros that was sold to the Lambton estate.
That would be remarkable. If,
Yes.
I mean, this is what museums try to do, with an exclamation point at the end. Like partnerships bringing cultural objects to the public to learn more, to draw these parallels with communities and individuals today. As you say, these are objects tied intimately and directly to identity. And I was somewhat joking with you earlier in the exhibition, because you did have an opportunity to see the show in the Walters Art Museum. And in those conversations, we learned more about the objects and, updated labels reflecting that, that added language. And there's more to learn each time these objects are seen by new audiences. And that is something that we have the opportunity here through this partnership with the Royal Ethiopian Trust, with Dr. Pankhurst, to be able to learn more and flesh these stories out. And I'm sure more will be learned and gleaned soon. So one question I have for both of you is, from your perspective, tell me what it was like to see the shield on view and then to enter into Ethiopia at the crossroads, and kind of what were your first impressions and what surprised you?
Everything surprised me. The beauty of this museum is something you don't expect in Toledo, Ohio, where it's my first visit.
It's not the first time I've heard that, I will say.
I was really awestruck by it. The exhibition itself, it's just so incredibly well done in terms of, from antiquity to present days, and how beautifully also the shield fit in the whole collection of these very beautiful and historical artifacts. So really my commendation to you, for Sophie and also Christine, for your hard work and research. And I recommend everybody in this room who hasn't seen that exhibition to really take time and look at it, because it's just incredible. And especially those who are young, it's a fantastic way to interact and learn about your history, your culture, and hopefully we continue with programs like this. That's my hope.
That is mine as well. Dr. Pankhurst.
I would second that. It was just a marvelous experience, especially the way in which the interconnections and the crossroads and the way that different cultures influence one another. I was in one way trying to show that with the story of the pistol, that here you have some stories that it has a link with Britain, and others with Rome, with Italy, and then with France, and the interconnections between global powers in Africa, and in this case Ethiopia, during that period in the 19th century. But then this exhibition shows you how interconnections went back so far with different civilizations and cultures, whether it's across the Red Sea or to Egypt or further afield. And it's so important, I think, for people to not put particular traditions of art in boxes and assume that there aren't influences that are pervasive and that ideas are moving and people are reacting to that. And what makes it very special in this case is that you have put ancient objects along with modern ones with digital art, and that makes the experience so much more rich and makes you think in all kinds of different ways. So I think it was a breathtaking experience this morning. I think we were all very moved and impressed and excited to see the sort of richness of that long and extraordinary history. So thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. So for many, the inner workings of museums are particular for those who work in them. We find them particularly fun. I don't know if the rest of the public does, but one of the things that is exciting about partnering with other museums is you can take a show that is extraordinary, like Ethiopia at the Crossroads, and it was wonderful to see it I had the good fortune to see it in Baltimore at the Walters Art Museum, and then again in Salem, Massachusetts at the Peabody Essex Museum. But the fun thing for a curator like myself is to get to adapt the exhibition for our own audiences. And so we've done that here at TMA. And that means that I got to include a couple works that were not in the show elsewhere, and that includes this massive digital installation of the House of the Yatreda by an Ethiopian family art collective, Yatreda. But one of the other artworks I added to the exhibition is a sculpture by Jacob Epstein from 1936, while Emperor Haile Selassie I and his kind of court and government were in exile in Bath. And obviously your grandfather. I wonder if you would speak about what it was like to see that sculpture, because I think maybe it was a surprise, maybe.
It was complete surprise, and it actually made me quite emotional, because I believe the sculptor captured the emperor at that particular time in history, which was a painful time for him. It was a time during his exile in World War II, and you can see how thin he was, but you see his resolve in his expressions. So I was just stunned to be able to see it from different directions, and also to get a sense of what the sculptor was trying to capture, and he did a fantastic job.
There's true presence. Alula.
Yes, I would like to add to that. My grandmother Sylvia knew Emperor Haile Selassie when he was in exile in Bath, and saw him several times. And it was such a difficult period because nobody knew if the end of the world was coming and whether fascism and Nazism would be defeated. And Emperor Haile Selassie had faith. He had a strong belief, even in the darkest hours, that he would come through that. And there were many who tried to persuade him, including delegations from Mussolini, to give up, but he just had that conviction that he needed to keep going and go back and then continue to rule and develop Ethiopia in all kinds of ways and bring it into the modern era. He was somebody that had a vision of modernism that was quite extraordinary, that really oriented his life along with his faith. And I think in that sculpture, you can see the grit, the determination of somebody at a low ebb and at a very difficult period in his life. He'd lost a lot of friends. There had been massacres in Ethiopia. There had been the mustard bombing. He was accused by some of betraying his country by leaving and not shooting himself like Theodros did. But he had the long vision. And I think you can see that energy and that determination in the face of adversity there.
I think you're so right. And for those who haven't kind of read the label, this is a sculpture that was, the emperor gave an impassioned speech at the League of Nations that year, 1936, that League of Nations develops into what we now today refer to as the United Nations. And the speech was so powerful, imploring kind of global leaders to enact the sanctions and to help Ethiopians kind of get their freedom back, that a British commander commissioned this sculpture. So quite an opposite act compared to the Shield of Magdala, right? To then see, but I think it ties in beautifully to the stories that you were sharing, Alula, because by this time there is restitution and awareness of these incredible artworks from Ethiopia in the UK. Lady Mia kind of leaving in her will that her manuscripts should go back to Ethiopia because they're not hers, right? And so here's a case where a British commander recognizes that Ethiopia needs British help at this time, and it needs global help. And so commissioned this sculpture to be created, and it was always intended to then be sold, the proceeds of which would help fund the Ethiopian kind of the fight. Anyway, I think it works beautifully into the narrative of what you were sharing earlier.
If I may add, which is an amazing thing for me personally to have experienced today, is that Sylvia Pankhurst, your grandmother, was the earliest supporter of my grandfather against fascism when he was alone in England. And for us to be able to sit here, sharing the blessings of our ancestors, and discuss the future is, I think, God's grace.
It's a testament to what community, friendship, partnership means in the world today, and this is the relationship between your families is one that goes back decades. But now we are at this moment in history as museums think about what the future is and as the world thinks about what the future is for collections. So I'd love to hear what message both of you think that this partnership what message does this partnership between the World Ethiopian Trust, Ethiopia, but then now even folding the Toledo Museum of Art into it, what this message sends about international collaboration on cultural heritage and what that future might be? It's a big question.
I'll give him time to think. For me, I think it's a learning curve. And for Alula, he's been in the game for much longer than I have. But what I see is with international collaboration, there is always bridge building and solutions, always. I mean, this shield is a testimony of just that fact, because it took a lot of thinking and a lot of diplomacy to make it happen. With a greater awareness, with greater collaboration, I think we will achieve more.
Prince Ermias said that I've been in the game a bit longer. I fell into the game when my father died, really. I was not all that concerned or interested about restitution and history before then, but somehow one fits into shoes that are far bigger than one's own. But I think that the whole world has shifted. There's been a paradigm shift that Prince Ermias had been referring to earlier, in the way that there were the shock waves from Black Lives Matters, from the whole movement of restitution, even heads of state like Emmanuel Macron talking about returning heritage to Africa. And I actually think that we're in a phase now where it is museum curators and directors who are in the driving seat of a change. It's no longer the public, it's actually museum curators who are rethinking how one portrays the past in ways that can bring about reparation, that can bring about healing, that can put objects in their historical and cultural context. But most importantly for me, it's all about building bridges. It's all about having those kinds of relationship with institutions in Ethiopia, and I think the Royal Ethiopian Trust can play a really important role in that bridging and in that building of relationships. I mean, in Ethiopia, the museum scene needs a lot of support. Here you have tremendous expertise, whether it's on restoration, whether it's on provenance research, and the elements of capacity building and joint work and joint research and joint celebration. I mean, this is a celebration, isn't it? And so that's what it's all about. It's not leaving these objects in a cupboard, but it's bringing them out for people to see, talk about, debate, enjoy, wonder, be amazed at. And the exhibition today was truly mind-blowing. It really had so much richness in color, in design, in craftsmanship. And the fact that this shield, a beautiful object, that is something that is for protection in a world full of conflict and war, and in a country at the moment when there is conflict and war in our beloved country, Ethiopia, it is something really special that this shield should have been part of this exhibition. And so that for me is something really, really special, that it didn't just go on a plane back to Ethiopia and back into a cupboard, and we now have a commitment from the Ethiopian Heritage Authority that this shield, in a memorandum of agreement with the Royal Ethiopian Trust, will go on permanent display so that young people and old in Ethiopia will be able to see this history, this shield, which has had its own life. And we need to discover more about what that life was. It came from Ethiopia, it went into some households in the UK, it traveled from UK to America, and it's had a life of its own, the life of things. And that's what's so special and what we should be celebrating.
I completely agree. So I think we could probably continue this conversation for significantly longer, but I know that we have a keen audience who has likely a few questions as well, and then we will continue the program first with a kind of a ceremonial moment of kind of unveiling the plaque that will accompany the shield back to the National Museum of Addis Ababa, as well as remarks from Nicholas Melillo from the Royal Ethiopian Trust, and as well as a performance of Ethiopian dance before we welcome you all to a reception. But I will, if you have a question, I think what probably best is to raise your hand. Or Tony is in the audience and is going to take this mic from me and walk it around. And I do just want to say a huge thanks to the Toledo Museum of Art team who has made, in addition to the Royal Ethiopian Trust, but the TMA team that has made this event possible. I'm so grateful for your hard work because it is truly a remarkable event, and I hope that you are thrilled. But here is Tony to take the mic from me, and I will stop talking and...
Thank you so much for this, and I'm sure I speak for everyone here to say this is such an honor to witness this. So first, thank you to Sophie and Dr. Christine, Prince Ermias, and Dr. Alula. I wanted to start where you all left off because you essentially are the legacy of both His Imperial Majesty and one of the biggest women liberators of our time. And so with that also comes great responsibility. We don't often see the arts as a place of politicization, but to your point, it has become that. And ironically, right, when the Black Lives Matter movement started here, it was looking at artifacts that symbolized a history of slavery, and in some ways just dismissed it. And we saw how that manifested in the destruction of artifacts because of the lack of recognition of the descendants of African Americans in their history in this country, looking, right, for a history that was on the other side of the globe, right, the symbol of Black liberation, home of the Organization of African Unity, and thanks to His Imperial Majesty and the legacy of Emperor Haile Selassie, there's a history that helped mobilize Black people across the globe to liberate themselves. Unfortunately, the history, the domestic sort of politics in the country also suggests a question around the protection of these artifacts. And so I'm happy to see that it's going to be in your hands, Dr. Alula, and credit to your father, Dr. Richard Pankhurst, who is an honorary son of the country, who spent his entire life preserving the history of Ethiopia. What are your comments and insights about the future and of the preservation of artifacts? I hope with the Royal Ethiopian Trust, this is the first of many artifacts to be returned to the country. But what is your sense of the protection? Because art has become both a symbol of inspiration as well as a symbol of or opportunity for destruction on part of some. So that's my question to both of you.
Several comments, or do you? Okay. Thank you. That's a really interesting and important question. And art is produced in its own time, and it reflects the values of that time. And then times change, and people question it and reinterpret it and rethink it. And I see that as a very positive trend. And the fascination and the way in which we look at the exhibition here, and you see these artifacts that were produced 300, 500, 1,000 years ago, and you had those skills and you had that thought and you had that way of thinking that represented maybe the power structures and the situation at the time. But these are historical records which need to be reinterpreted through different lenses and light. And that's exciting. That's what rethinking history is about. And that's why I think these exhibitions that show the connections across different cultures, I think that's, for me, the big takeaway from this exhibition.
I agree with you, Alula. I think art, whether it be in performing arts or any form, is a powerful healing medium. And it was also an inspirational medium, because as fast as the world is changing, we're seeing also very talented young Ethiopian artists coming to the fore. And that was part of the Ethiopian Crossroads exhibition, because we truly are at the crossroads also in terms of how we utilize technology in the future to express ourselves, to communicate. So it's an exciting time.
Just to add on to that, I think that's 100% right. With the Atreides Abyssinian Queen artwork, for them, for the artists, they've activated this ancient legend and folklore that Kia used to play with her sister Roman in their backyard. But it is a way of, for them, blockchain technology, digital technology, art is a preservation of heritage. And Kia Yatreda mints on the blockchain because it's believed to, be there in perpetuity. She says it's her way of carving into stone. And, you're going to see more and more and more of Yatreda, and this was their first museum partnership. But we also have other incredible artists in the exhibition: Mary Koka Berahanu, Helena Metaferia, Julie Meritu. I mean, there's some wonderful Ethiopian and Ethiopian diasporic artists activated in the show.
Greetings. My name is Raz Jeremiah Tafarai. And with your permission, on this day forward, they can no longer call me Jeremiah. They call me Ermias. I've taken on my Ethiopian culture and taken on my true name. I spelt it that way because I'm in America. America is a big museum, and we are part of that collection. And today, to see the shield go back to Ethiopia is a great thing in terms of reparations and repatriation. which we as Rastafari fight for every day. 2 questions. First to Your Majesty. And to you, this museum is one of the best museums I've ever been in. The Smithsonian Institute is soft compared to this place. I was blown away. But Your Majesty, when the shield goes back, is it going to Ethiopia? And if you can, elaborate more on how that's going to work, if it's going to Ethiopia or it's going to stay somewhere else.
No, absolutely. It's going back to Ethiopia after this exhibit because we would have regretted had this beautiful piece not been displayed to people of interest. And honestly, we couldn't have found a more beautiful museum, a more receptive audience, and such a beautiful display room. So we feel very happy that everybody had a chance to at least not only see it for themselves, but hear the history and the discussions that follow so that they can think ahead. So really, I want to also really thank the community for having given my wife and I such a welcome. And what's the beauty of this museum is that look at the crowd. It is diverse. And unless we bring art to our diverse communities, to those who have had no opportunities to be comfortable in places such as these, in museums beautiful like this, they could be a very beautiful learning source for a majority of people.
And on behalf of the Rastafari community in Ohio, especially the Rasta Coalition in Columbus, and your people for inviting us to be here today, is truly a blessing. And I will remember this day forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more. The second question is for Mr. Pankhurst. And could you please elaborate more on who Ms. Pankhurst was? As a African American, no longer African American, but because of her books and because of His Majesty, His Imperial Majesty, I took on the Ethiopian culture, being a person that didn't know where he belonged, but knowing that I was an African. But having read her books made me closer to Ethiopia, and that's why I recognize myself as Ethiopia in exile. Could you please explain more about her as a writer and her life in Ethiopia? And if you have any books, where could we get them?
Thank you. My grandmother Sylvia was an artist, and she went to Venice to study art. And that's when she saw the rise of fascism and Mussolini's black shirts that were thugs really doing all kinds of very nasty things to people. And she could see that fascism was a force that was very evil. And she came back, and when she heard that Mussolini was thinking of invading Ethiopia, she started the journal called New Times and Ethiopian News. And when Emperor Haile Selassie came to exile in the UK, she met him on several occasions and continued to publicize the resistance of the patriots in Ethiopia, which was being denied by the British press. And so she then had this newspaper that tried to show that the people of Ethiopia were not accepting the Italian invasion. And that was how she became interested in Ethiopia and started to learn from Ethiopians in exile and write about Ethiopia. And then Emperor Haile Selassie invited her immediately after the war to come and visit Ethiopia, and like many Rastafarians, she settled there and lived the rest of her life there, and well, the rest is history.
I think we have time for one more question, so please, yes.
Giving honor first to my father Yahweh, giving honor to His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I for the gifts that he gave Black America for joining the fight with Ethiopia, giving honor to you for the struggle you have gone through. I want to ask a question. You ready? In my culture, Magdala is where the royalty was raised and trained. It is also connected to Mary Magdalene's name. So I just want to ask, is there a connection with the word Magdala and the word Magdala that's in the Hebrew scriptures?
Could you say it one more time? I didn't
Ready? In my culture, Yahweh, the God of Yahshua, Magdala is where the royalty was raised and trained and formed. But it's also the tower of the flock, the daughter of Zion. And I'm just asking, is it connected? Is there a connection between the name of the shield being Magdala? Mary Magdalene, the place in Yahshua. It's actually a scripture in Micah, that's why I'm asking.
Yes, I think, Alula, you're better versed than I am. I've looked it up on the geography map. I know where Magdala is, but I don't know what the word means, what the word insinuates, whether it becomes from our biblical times or a Giz words, I'm not sure.
Maybe Solomon does. Solomon, I think, has an answer here.
Hello, my name is Solomon Kabrigi. I am a deacon in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and I have a little bit of an answer for you, ma'am. So, yes, Magdala in Ethiopia is a mountain, Amba Magdala, and it's named for Magdala in the Holy Land, from where Mary Magdalene was. So there is a connection.